Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to our session this morning on Swift for Corporates, the Global Treasury of the Future. My name is Fiona Crisp. I'm an ex-president of the ACT. I'm an independent Treasury consultant, and I've been involved with the ACT for many years, more than I care to think, really. I'm joined on this session today by Stefan Kohler from Swift, Patrick Holemans, who is the treasurer of Swift, and Lorraine Keogh, who is the treasurer for Experian. Just to give you some housekeeping, we have, for this session, there is an opportunity for you to ask questions through the Q&A button, which you will find at the bottom of your screen. There was, for the end of the session, a survey. We won't have any polls on this one, but we will. The session is being recorded. You'll be able to look at it on the ACT website anytime for the next month. But that's all in the short term. If you have any questions that you'd like to give to the panel, please put them onto the website and we'll try and get to them if we can. So I'd like to start by asking each of my speakers to introduce themselves. And if I can start with you, Stefan.
Thank you, Fiona. Yeah, so my name is Stefan Kohler. I'm working in Swift for Corporates now for the last 5 years. Before that, I worked in corporate payments at American Express.
Thank you. And Patrick?
Hello, my name is Patrick Holemans. I'm the treasurer of Swift. I joined Swift a long time ago, 20 years ago, but I'm since 10 years now in Treasury, managing the treasury operations for Swift globally.
Good, thank you.
I'm also a member of the ATAP, which is the Belgian Association of Corporate Treasurers.
Excellent, lovely. Thank you, Patrick. And Lorraine.
Morning, everyone. So my name is Lorraine. I'm the Deputy Treasurer at Experian. I've been at Experian since 2008 now, and previous roles include I qualify or trained as a qualified accountant in PwC. So that's my background.
Excellent. Good. Well, thank you very much. I think it's easier for everybody to introduce themselves than for me to introduce you. Okay, what we'd like to do this morning is make a start by just giving you a little bit of a background to Swift itself. And I thought it might be useful, Stefan, if you wouldn't just mind giving us a very, very brief introduction to Swift for those who are not familiar with what it is and what it does.
Thank you, Fiona. Sure. So Swift has been around for around 40 years. It's a member-owned cooperative. The members are the financial players and institutions across the world. And Swift is, Swift works with all of these players to provide standardized messaging and a secure network to exchange information with each other. I've heard the Swift described as a postman before, and I think that's a very basic way to visualize it. So it's a secure network upon which messages can be sent from one counterparty to another in a standardized way. In addition to the messaging platform, Swift also develops value-add services to keep the kind of financial cogs turning across all industries.
Thank you very much. And our session this morning is going to be focusing on Swift for Corporates, which is a relatively new. It started just with banks, but now corporates are able to actually access it. So I'd like to start by turning to you, Patrick. You're the group treasurer at Swift. Can you just say something about how long you've been in that role and give me a sense of what the setup and team structure looks like at Swift?
Yeah, so approximately around 10 years in the role of Treasury. I joined the Treasury team with a team of 4 or 5 people. Now we are 9 people with 7 people in headquarters in Brussels. Swift is headquarters based in Brussels, but we also have a big operating center in Kuala Lumpur. So there's 2 people in KL as well working for Treasury. We are very centralized in the setup. So all the cash management, the foreign exchange management, and the payment and the collection factory, as we call it, is all done out of headquarters. So there's no local finance and treasury presence in the remote offices. We have 25 offices of Swift globally, for which we mentioned handle all the cash out of Brussels. Also, because we have a global footprint, we have a lot of currency exposure. We are a Belgian company, our currency is euro. So everything which is not euro is exposure. And since we are present in all these financial cities all around the world, we have quite a lot of fixed exposure to manage. But again, this is all done centrally out of Brussels with 2 support people in KL, mainly focusing on KYC, which we're going to talk about later, I suppose, and as well on bank statement reconciliation.
Good, thank you. And so, how did you manage your treasury operations before you joined Swift? If we can get a background to yours, then we can ask Lorraine later about Experian.
Sure. So when I joined Swift, we were not on SwiftNet yet, which was honestly quite annoying. When I was visiting conferences at the time, people came to me and they said, "What, you're working at Swift? You're not on SwiftNet?" So it was quite embarrassing at that point in time. So my first target was to get on Swift, as we call it, drink our own champagne, right? So that was my first task, to get on SwiftNet. So we went on Light 2, I think it was 5 years ago. Gradually, but on a 6-month period, we moved all our bank accounts. So we talk about 80 bank accounts with 5 global banks. We moved them all on SwiftNet over a couple of months period, integrated with our ERP system. So what happened before, as with lots of corporates, not on Swift, I suppose, running around with a bag of tokens, full of tokens, and connecting to all the different bank applications separately, with tons of passwords to remember, and downloading and uploading payment files on daily basis in all the applications. But it was quite not efficient, to put it, not efficient and time consuming. Lots of time was spent on connection to the applications, maintaining the applications. We had 5-6 bank applications to maintain, to make sure that all the users are properly set up, to make sure that if people move, we remove their dongles, remove the passwords. So, and then also cash management was not easy. Cash management was downloading the bank statements from the different bank applications and loading them up in the ERP system. So we implemented at the same time SAP Treasury application, and we migrated all our banking connections via Light 2 to the ERP to get one channel for all the in and out flows.
Thank you. So very much before you had Swift, it was very much a manual process, a lot of different linkages that you had to make with your banks, and now you've got them all in one place. And we'll explore a little bit about that later, I hope, about and how things have been probably a lot easier for you during lockdown than they have been for a number of other corporates, I'm sure. Lorraine, maybe can we turn to you now and you tell us a little bit about what your position was like at Experian before you had Swift and now?
Yes, no, indeed, happy to. So I guess pre-Swift, very similar to what Patrick has just spoken to, we operated across various different electronic banking platforms. Essentially, we used FIS Quantum as our treasury management system. It produced a payment file, and details were then entered into beneficiary saved templates within each of our banking platforms. As Patrick has suggested, this meant many channels to maintain, users on different platforms, multiple tokens, etc. And I think when we reflected on our processes back probably 2015, to us that a lot of our processes were integrated or automated to a high, with the exception of payments. And cash essentially are scarier. So our trading platform integrated, our confirmation process fully integrated, and our EMEA reporting. I think just that we still had a little bit of manual intervention in our payments process at that time. So hence we started the journey of exploring Swift as a solution. And I think what Swift offered us was a single channel where we could maintain all of our administration. We had one token, we had all of the banks that we wanted. But for us was that it allowed us to be bank agnostic. So instead of maintaining multiple hosts, Swift that bank agnostic.
Good, thank you. That's been a very good background. So I think the theme seems to me to be moving from multi-bank, having to do a lot of manual intervention, to having one single method for making your payments. One of the things that I would like to explore, we probably haven't mentioned before, are the control elements in there. You both mentioned about having lots of dongles to carry around with you for all the different banks before you joined Swift, and now you have one. And I know when I spoke to some of my colleagues, when they started looking at lockdown and having to work from home, one of the key things was to make sure that all the payment providers, the payment authorizers, had their dongles at home with them, and that they could actually access from home. How has that been for you, Patrick, on Swift when you moved into lockdown?
Yeah, indeed. Because we are on Swift, we're not using dongles anymore. To be fully transparent, we have still some countries, meaning local banks, which are not yet on Swift, which are going to migrate soon. And for those, indeed, we need the dongles. And we said to everybody, Swift offices have been closed for a long time, so everybody had to take those specific dongles home. But it's very limited. 95% of our payments go over SwiftNet now with the core banks. And there we don't need any dongle anymore. We use Lie 2, which is integrated with SAP. So the files are generated by SAP and they are approved through workflows in SAP and then sent straight via what we call the auto client, the connectivity, straight connectivity over Lie 2 to the bank. So dongles, it's a problem. It's super risky, I think. I mean, passwords, there are too many passwords to retain, so we have to store them somewhere. And I was very much afraid of all this because we need a couple of people to approve. We need a couple of people to prepare. So easily you have 5-6 people involved in the payment factory. Those people move around, so we have to make sure we maintain them properly. So luckily that before COVID, we were on SwiftNet and we didn't need these dongles anymore. And in fact, they're now just somewhere in a box, and we don't need them. And I think that's for me the biggest advantage, honestly.
So thank you. So they will be going to the museum of archive of no longer required because of developments in technology. Excellent. And so Patrick, from your perspective, the word control and safety were key considerations. Lorraine, what were the main considerations for you in your implementation of Swift? Was control critical to you?
Yes, very much so. As I mentioned earlier, we need to ensure we safeguard our assets, cash being one of those. We wanted to work on this journey of digitization, which allowed manual. But I think at the time, one of the factors was also cost for us. Because we have moved forward with implementation for Treasury, not for the group at large, one of the prohibitants past has been cost. So how could we justify a Swift solution, given that we were doing a subset of our overall number of bank accounts? And I think Swift Alliance 2, the cloud-based solution, essentially removed that barrier for us. So we could have in the past proceeded full Swift implementation through a service bureau, but I think the cost element had certainly been overcome with the Alliance Light 2 option that we proceeded to implement. But control was very much at the forefront.
Excellent. And could you just tell us a little bit, Lorraine, please, about what ERP system you use and how that connects to Swift? You mentioned the part of the process and using Swift Alliance Light 2, but what do you connect through to with your ERP?
Yeah, so essentially the way our process operates today, we use FIS Quantum as our treasury management system. It will produce an EFT, file, which is then picked up by the Swift Auto client and essentially taken into the Alliance Flight 2 web interface. So we still continue to use an online portal. So it's slightly different to what Patrick had spoken about earlier. While there is an option essentially to authorize payments within our Treasury management system, we have an internal constraint to do with user licenses because some of our authorizers sit outside of the Treasury team. So to overcome that, we have essentially routed the payments to an online portal where users use a single dongle to access. It contains the authentication certificate, and they are authorized within that web-based platform. I guess in terms of our process, just to call out two other specifics that we have implemented in our solution, one of the key questions that arose at the time of trying to identify a Swift solution, how can we be comfortable that payment files are not tampered while they're at rest? So when they've come from the management system into our server, how can we get comfortable that they haven't been manipulated or tampered with in any way? We opted to implement a piece of Swift software, which is known as local authentication, which essentially does that exact job. So that tells us that the file has not tampered with since it has left our treasury management system and been up by the auto client piece of software, or a Swift piece of software. The second piece of software we have put into our process is our treasury management system produced a payment file that was inconsistent with the way the client was expecting the file. The additional piece of software, which is known as Swift integration layer, what that has allowed us to do.
Sorry, we missed that last bit. You were stuttering a bit.
Apologies.
The line to Ireland's a bit slow, I think.
So the Swift integration layer is a piece of software that essentially does some data conversion. So it picks up a file from our ERP system and transforms that file into an auto client compliant format. So the process, in summary, is essentially the EFT produces a payment file. It then goes through two pieces of Swift software. The auto client picks up the final format file, brings it into our web-based platform, Alliance Flight 2, and authorizers then access that online portal to the payment.
Good, thank you. That sounds like a very efficient process. Patrick, I wonder if I can come back to you. You mentioned how you've actually got nearly all your payments are going through the Swift platform. I'm wondering, does that include all your payments? I'm sorry, we haven't talked about this before, but I'm just aware that, for example, a lot of companies may put their have their HR files, so their staff payments and salary payments may go through another banking platform. Do you use Swift for all your payments, other than the few?
So 95% of the payments they go over SwiftNet, independently if it's payroll or not payroll. It's more linked to the location. So Swift Ghana and Swift Kenya in Africa, for instance, they're not yet on SwiftNet. We're working on that, but the ones who are on SwiftNet, so the US, the Europe and Asia, Middle East, we do all the payments. So the payment factory is handling the vendor and the staff payments, generating the payment files out of SAP and sending them over SwiftNet via AutoClient. And then the treasury system is generating all the FX and the money market transactions as well. And there are also files generated in this that also go via the AutoClient to the various banks. So it's all the flows. The ones which we are missing is because we're not yet on SwiftNet with them. But we integrated both sides, treasury and non-treasury flows.
Good, thank you. Now, Patrick, I understand that you're also an active member of the Belgian Association of Corporate Treasurers, and so you're close to many of the challenges that are faced by them, not only by you, but by treasurers across all the industries. What would you say are the key challenges that are faced by you and your peers?
Yeah, so indeed, I'm a board member of the association. So it's a smaller association, the ACT. We are 150 members, mostly Belgian corporate treasurers. And the biggest challenge initially that we suffered was, I mean, are we going to be able to work from home? Everybody. So we had lots of discussions. I mean, will the connection be okay? Will the capacity be okay? And how are we going to do with the payments indeed? I mean, for those who are not yet still working with dongles, as you mentioned initially, I mean, how are we going to make sure there's security around the treasury operations? That was the initial focus, I think, on security and technology. And then secondly, we discussed a lot about in the association about the BCP, the business continuity planning. Suppose it gets worse. Suppose, particularly in my case, for Belgium, the offices were closed, but suppose it gets that bad that all the treasury staff in Belgium gets ill and it cannot work. And because it's so much centralized here, we worked quite intensively on a BCP plan to set up new users remotely in Kuala Lumpur or in our New York office and do tests in case we would all be out. Can they run the operations? So there was lots of focus initially how to support all the treasurers and how to guide them in case of a full lockdown of a country, which was at a certain point in time maybe not so unrealistic. Now it's getting better. So that has been done. The BCPs has been tested, and we shared it also within the community of the Treasury members and help the other treasurers to work on their resilience. And now it's more back to usual. And well, the focus today is lots of negative interest rates. I mean, for companies who have now in a cash position need to invest cash. I mean, it's still difficult to find the good investment opportunities. So the focus is more driving back again now to the treasury, to cash management, to the treasury world. So COVID is a little bit less put aside. Negative interest rates and digitalization is also something we're working on, to be more efficient. I mean, we are using all this technology today to communicate with all of you. So we're also looking at robotics for the moment to automate some more of our analytical tools. I'm sorry. Looking at AI, artificial intelligence, the payment factory, to come back on that, we're looking at a tool to automate the testing of the payment files before they go out. We're looking at Swift as well, to look at sanction screening modules on the payment factories to make sure that our payments get released without any issue on sanction regime. So, well, that's effective focus, and that's where our Treasury Association in Belgium is working on. Digitalization, technology, and the sanction regimes as well, the sanction payments.
Very interesting.
Yeah, the KYC stuff is also, of course, something which is on the mind of lots of people. So that's we're working closely as well with lots of corporates in Belgium to propose KYC solutions. But we might come back on that later, I suppose.
Thank you. Yes, we will be coming back on KYC shortly. But Lorraine, you're a member of the ACT. I wonder whether you might share any thoughts from your perspective that any of your ACT colleagues may have raised with you.
Yes, no, I think it's very similar to what I've spoken to. So I think the whole area of digitization is a theme out there at the moment. You know, cash is king, and I think in COVID times, real-time visibility of cash is more important than ever. And I think, you know, in sessions there was talk about APIs and how they can enhance treasury processes. I think that digitization theme has enhanced in COVID times, but that is very much at the forefront right now.
Thank you. So Stefan, if I can turn to you, because I think we've certainly heard from Patrick and Lorraine very much the importance of security and being able to access all liquidity through lockdown. I just wonder if you could say anything from your experience at Swift as to how some of your customers have been talking to you about the issues, and then we can perhaps look at some of the other issues that have been raised, such as payment sanctions, digitization, and cash visibility. So, anything from your perspective at Swift?
Yeah, thanks, Fiona. And I can't really say it any better than Patrick and Lorraine. So at Swift, the whole value story around Swift for Corporates is on account reporting, so having that central visibility of cash that Patrick and Lorraine have spoken to, having streamlined payments. And in the last years, Swift has been very active in two particular areas when it comes to the corporate space. The first one is the global payments innovation, which is sort of developing into different value-add solutions for both outbound payment tracking and also inbound. So when it comes to liquidity management, Fiona, Lorraine just mentioned having real-time visibility. And I think with the Swift Global Payments Innovation, where it's going to is actually having advance notification of payments that are coming to you. So even faster than payments on your account, you can actually, as a treasurer, you can actually get notified that payments are on their way to you. So it gives you a real liquidity management edge, I would say. But yes, speaking to treasurers in the current context of the pandemic, I think all of the core themes which have been central to the Swift for Corporates area for almost 20 years now are still the themes which are deemed important. So it's security, it's standardization, which drives increased STP and efficiency, which we've heard a lot about in today's discussion, and having that central visibility all in one place for a really complex global banking footprint. So it's a lot of the key themes. Also, when we think about other treasury areas of focus like KYC, which we've heard about, that's another area where we're getting a lot of interest. Swift has developed a KYC registry, which is like a central web-based platform where standardized KYC information is gathered and can be shared through clicks with different banking partners across the world. So that makes the whole process of KYC something that's very non-standardized and time-consuming and manual, and makes it much more standardized and automated, and something that almost happens in the background, which frees up time on the bank side, the account management teams at banks and all the teams that are chasing for information across different channels. And also on the treasury side, it frees up time of corporate treasurers who are trying to understand the different questionnaires. Even though they all ask for the same thing, they seem to come in different formats and shapes and sizes. And it helps them to smooth out the process internally on their side as well. So they're the key themes that we see at the moment.
So GPI and KYC, lots more three-letter acronyms coming up. But the KYC is certainly exciting from my perspective, knowing how important it is and how time-consuming it is to a number of my clients and my corporate treasury colleagues. Delighted to see that that's something that Swift is bringing to the table. We've had a question come through from the audience. I'd like to and I think probably you're the best one to answer this one, Stefan, as well. Do you think a Swift solution only really works in a centralized organization with one or two ERPs and a relatively small number of banks? In other words, is a decentralized organization with multiple ERPs and multiple banks destined to continue using multiple bank host-to-host solutions? Whew, there we go.
That's quite a mouthful, but no, I don't think Swift. I think Swift makes sense when an organization is dealing with multiple banks. That's where the value comes, and the whole mission of Swift for Corporates is simplifying multi-banking for corporate treasury. So what I would say is the complexity of an implementation will go up the more systems need to be integrated, but the end result is the same. So it's efficiency dealing with multiple banks. I think you have to look at your project in two parts. There's how complex is your organization to integrate? So whether you're using a TMS or multiple TMSs or multiple ERPs, how complicated is that to integrate into the sort of central Swift gateway, which will then bring the information to your banking counterparts? And also then the other side of it is, actually connecting your banks to your SWIFT connection. We do have customers, and we have a spectrum of customers, some that even only deal with one or two banks, and have different reasons for using SWIFT in that case, to corporates that have many ERPs deployed, usually because of as a result of different M&A activity, and very more decentralized treasury operations. So maybe 3 regions, each with their own treasury center, all connecting into SWIFT. So it's a really broad spectrum. But I think the value from SWIFT is when you're dealing with multiple banks. That's when you'll get your efficiencies.
Good, thank you very much. Now another question coming from the audience. I think this one's probably better for you, Lorraine. How did you justify the cost of using SWIFT GPI to the organisation? So I think you've partially answered that, but maybe you could clarify.
Yeah, no, certainly. So just to clarify, we don't actually use GPI right now, but we do use the cloud-based solution I'd like to do. So in terms of the cost, I guess, we've all spoken to enhanced control, provability, etc. I think part of the justification. I also think that consider the maintenance of multiples versus the maintenance of a single channel. There is a resource saving there. Individual that's essentially reactivating tokens for, dormant users, or uploading different beneficiary templates into multiple platforms. There is the saving on that side that can then be built into the argument for the cost.
Thank you. So some cost savings, but more importantly, a lot of security benefits and being able to get that straight through processing, which takes away a lot of the risk from that payment activity. Good, thank you.
Exactly.
Good. We've got quite a few more questions coming through, which is excellent. We've got one here, and I don't know whether, Patrick, this is one for you. It's saying, I see the announcement that SWIFT is looking at small value payments. What's driving this change, given the plethora of products out there for corporates? Because you said, Patrick, that you use them for all your payments.
No, I think I have to refer to Stefan for that one, because I'm not sure I can reply to that question, Stefan.
Okay, so
Sure,
I'll pass that to you, Stefan.
I mean, I'll have a go here. I mean, I have to say there is last week SWIFT announced a new strategy, a new 2-year strategy, which is looking at developing more services to facilitate payments and deliver services to end customers for the banking world. So value to corporate treasurers as well, more at the core. And one of those aspects is, extending the scope of where SWIFT typically can add a lot of value. I don't want to sort of go into this topic too much, because I'm not the expert to discuss this, but I certainly am available to field questions, afterwards by email, and link people up that need to know, that would like to know more, with colleagues that can actually speak to these topics. So sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Just had to ask the question that came up. Going back to some of the other questions we'd originally looked at. So SWIFT has developed an online registry to work in the interbank space and rolled it out successfully in 2014. Could you tell me about why and how you got involved in this project to expand that into the corporate to bank space? Patrick.
Yeah. I suppose you talk about the KYC registry, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So, I mean, all the corporates, are suffering today with KYC. So I think there were lots of local, domestic initiatives, at least in Belgium, where I'm working. People were trying with local Belgian banks to set up something up, and that's interesting for if you're local in a local company, but a global company like SWIFT and most of you probably in the audience. I mean, they are not served with a local solution. So Swift had put this KYC in place for the correspondent banking, and then they use the same technology and the same tool to roll it out to corporates. But I mean, the benefits of this kind of tool is only when there is participation from both sides, from the banks and the corporates. That's why the ATEP, the Association of Corporate Treasury in Belgium, worked together with Swift to set up working groups and discuss with between our members and with banks. A very nice concept, by the way. So we sat together with 10 corporates, 10 banks, and we said, okay, what is common in all your questionnaire? I think, Stefan, you mentioned it. I mean, 80% of the questionnaires look similar, just different format, but the questions are always the same. So based on that feedback that we gave, that the corporates gave, and the banks gave, we sat together and with Swift, and Swift extended, in fact, their KYC registry to make it available for corporates. I think it was a couple of years ago, indeed, and the take-up was in the beginning difficult, but we needed to get some corporates actively contributing to that portal, feeding data, and I think now we are picking up quite good. Lots of banks are on the portal, lots of corporates. We try to feed the system, and we make publicity now. If a new bank is asking me a KYC, I direct them to the KYC register. Everything is on there. I mean, our passports are securely stored, our annual reports, everything they want to see is on the registry. We provide them access, dedicated access, and restricted access as well. And they consume the information. So it's super helpful. Indeed, I had one FTE in Kuala Lumpur working on KYC in the past. I think that has been reduced to 50%, and the only thing she's doing today is feeding the registry and promoting the portal to our banks. I mean, it's a strong negotiation power as well we have. Look, if you want to work with us, you use the portal, because we're not gonna send the passports of our CEO via mail to 25 banks. We just put it once there, and we restrict the access to the passport. We control the access and who consumes it. It's a question of protection of private data and a question of controlling the access to private data. Lots of this KYC stuff it's private stuff. It's things we don't like to share via just email channel. We want to have a very secure channel which controls who gets what and within which period of time.
Absolutely, thank you very much. And I just wonder, maybe I could ask Stefan, one of the questions has come through from the audience. Does your KYC solution work with some of the smaller banks and challenger banks? How many banks would you say are using the solution? And is there a geographic trend, i.e. are some countries using it more than others?
So I would say, the KYC registry is a web-based portal, so it works with absolutely any bank and any corporate. At the moment, in terms of corporate access, it is restricted to Swift connected corporates, and that's very much just to fine-tune and prove out the system before expanding it beyond that. In terms of the banking question, any bank can use, any bank that is a Swift member, that is, can use the KYC registry and integrate that into their own KYC processes. In fact, I would really encourage them to do that. I think there is a strong request from corporate treasurers that I've heard KYC described as kill your customer, as a slight joke. I think, there's a real request for the banking industry to adopt this and make it something that is widespread and a utility for corporate treasurers to use. So the whole premise, as Patrick described, is that a corporate treasurer completes their profile. It's standardized, so it can be used for any bank. The questionnaire is broken into 5 different sections. Depending on the relationship that you're establishing with your banking partner, you can share all 5 sections with it or just choose which ones. Some corporate treasurers have lead banks, which they have to share more robust information with, and other more peripheral banks where they will share just a section or 2 of their profile. And on the corporate treasury side, they just need to maintain the information. It's a bit like maintaining your LinkedIn profile or your social media profile. You put your information on there, who you are, what your interests are, etc. And you maintain that as you go so that it's current. You know, you don't want to have a profile from 20 years ago if your interests have changed and all that. So it's very much the similar concept with KYC, right? Your information needs to be kept up to date. So you have to refresh documents that are on there, but the whole system is designed to trigger an alert or a reminder to update a document if it is one that has a kind of time sensitivity. But yeah, then it puts the control of who accesses that information into the hands of the corporate. I think one thing I want to mention, which maybe hasn't come across yet, is how these solutions are developed. So Swift is actually in a very lucky and unique position, which we do not take for granted at all, where we can actually bring corporate treasurers on the one hand and banks and bank product teams on the other into a room together around a table to discuss mutual challenges. And it's always interesting to see the dynamic. I think Patrick can attest to this. He's been in different working groups in this dynamic where it starts off quite tense, but you can realize very quickly the change when common problems and issues are put on the table, and you realize that actually, you know, everyone's in the same boat, as it were, and it's amazing how that dynamic can shift into problem solving, and then new solutions can evolve out of that. And GPI, the Global Payments Innovation, and the KYC solution that we're talking about, these are concrete examples of that.
Thank you. And that was, we've just got a few minutes left, so I was just going to ask Patrick to tell us a little bit about his involvement in GPI and what GPI was trying to solve.
Yeah. So GPI, I think we are live now with GPI Inbound Tracking, which is, Outbound Tracking, which is the payments going out, tracking the payments go out, and we are now piloting, and I think we recently went live as well with the inbound tracking. But if I focus first on outbound tracking, so GPI, it's like putting a DHL tracker, right, or on your payment. So the payment goes from bank A to B. It goes via different channels until destination. And we had lots of problems. We paid the vendor. The vendor told us we didn't see the money. Where's the money? So what we do, we call the bank, right? We call our initiating bank. They told us the money has left. I will check with the correspondent bank where the money is. And then after a couple of hours or days, you get a response. So now what we do for all the euro and dollar high value payments, we put a tracker on there. And it's a tracker generated by SAP. In fact, the SAP puts a tracker on the payments, and the payment follows, in fact, the chain. And that tracker is also in our payment cockpit. So if there's a question coming from a vendor on a payment that we sent, an urgent payment that we sent via an MT101, through the tracker, through the status of the tracker, we can see where the money is. So our payment factory is fed by tracker update statuses, by MT199s that come in every time the payment moves from bank A to bank B to bank C, whatever. We get a message from the tracker into our payment cockpit, telling us, well, the money moved from bank B to C. It's now at bank C, and then we know where the money is stuck. That's outbound. It works very well for euro and dollar corridors for the time being. But we're very keen on the inbound tracking. That's the money that is expected to come in, and it's not only important for me, cash management, because we can take our cash investments one day earlier. We know the money will come in because it's in the flow. But it's also important for collection people. We have lots of global customers, and I mean, if the customer tells us, "I paid you," I mean, okay. Now we ask them, okay, give us a tracker. What's the sorry to repeat it, what's the DHL, what's the tracker number? If you have a tracking number, we can check ourselves where's the money. And for us, it's more a proof of payment than anything else for the collection people. So I'm very keen. I'm looking forward to the inbound tracking a lot, to really monitor, to check where the money is for cash investment and where the money is if a customer promises to pay. So, and both of this happens through working groups. So we are in working groups, the same as the KYC stuff. So we are in working groups on GPI, together working with banks and corporates, getting this rolled out.
Thank you very much. So that's a lot of potential for things moving forward and where things are progressing within within the SWIFT network and for corporates, and that communication between corporates and banks as well, very valuable. Lorraine, we have half a minute left. Just wondering whether, from your perspective, there is anything that you're looking to do in the short term on the payment side that we haven't mentioned yet.
Not on the payment side. I welcome the opportunity KYC processes through SWIFT. I think most corporate treasuries would say main pain points. So certainly, following today's presentation, it's something that we will look into further.
Good. Well, thank you very much. And what I'd like to do is to say thank you to all my speakers, to Stefan, Patrick and Lorraine, to thank SWIFT for sponsoring this really valuable session for the ACT. And I'd like to thank you, the audience, for joining us and for a very many range of questions. I'm afraid we haven't had time to get to all of them because we already had a lot that we needed to cover. So just to remind you, please, you can continue the discussion and chat directly with your fellow attendees within the networking lounge. Please pay a visit to the exhibition hall. I was in there a lot of yesterday. Really exciting to see how many people, how many suppliers are there for us to go and talk to. And I'd ask you all to please complete the session survey, which is located next to the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens. There are lots of other live stream sessions today, so please join us later on in the day. And I'd like to just finish by thanking again SWIFT and my fellow panelists. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.